Part 1. The Demon. The demon flowed with exquisite speed and skill, a graceful dance of death and violence. Tannen's blood boiled, his twin hearts pumping furiously as his fangs sank into the throat of his opponent. The struggle had been fierce, but the demon knew this to be a killing maneuver, self-starved to lend an edge to his ferocity. Tannen's violent drive couldn't be stopped. He descended into the lower planes, where any confrontation meant win or be annihilated. The stakes thrilled him. They always did. His prey was a slug-oth, twice Tannen's size but half his intelligence and guile. Tannen knew he was smarter than any other demon he came across, his will mightier by far, and he used that, and every other weapon in his arsenal, to triumph without fail. Tannen's razor-sharp teeth dug deeper into the slug-oth's unprotected neck. Feeling confident of the purchase he'd gained, Tannen wrenched his head backwards, feeling his kill's flesh tearing away from its neck and into his mouth. Sizzling and acidic, the putrid-smelling blood sprayed Tannen's gray and orange mottled skin, burning the sight from one of his 4 eyes. It did not matter. Despite the searing pain, the demon attempted to push the agony into the recesses of his immensely developed brain. Tannen was blessed with quick regeneration from any injury he'd suffered. The eyeball would grow back. A fair price to pay for victory, he thought, ignoring the stink of his own burning flesh and oculus, which had popped, the remnants dripping down his cheek. Instead, Tannen focused on the slug-oth. Its blood ran down its body, across its chest and stomach, searing away flesh as it passed. The creature stupidly tried to stop its life source leaving the freshly opened gash by clasping 2 of its 6 hands to the jagged wound across its throat. Its other arms hung uselessly by its side, strength already fleeing its limbs. The slug-oth's palms burned to the bone from the effort. Stupid beast, Tannen thought, suddenly disappointed with the ease of his dominion. The slug-oth took a step forward, then another. Tannen backed away slowly, watching with learned patience as it attempted advancing for a 3rd time. The slug-oth collapsed into the dirt, steam rising from below its ruined torso as its blood mixed with the lifeless ground. Tannen glanced around at the blasted landscape that stretched as far as he could see. A few demons of various types lingered on the edge of his vision, curious to see the outcome of the battle. Besting a slug-oth with little cause for concern would make other creatures think twice before approaching the victor. Satisfied with his work, Tannen extended his claws and began slicing the remaining flesh from the dead creature's carcass at his feet. Time to eat, he thought to himself, salivating at the prospect of still warm carrion working its way to his stomach. Part 2. The Plains. Tannen peered across the plains as he hunkered over the pile of flesh in front of him. He'd moved his meal away from the slug-oth, its acidic blood charring the bones of the once mighty creature. The demon world, as Tannen knew it, felt still. Dirty, ochre-colored mountains, where he'd journeyed from days earlier, towered beyond the plains in the distance. A quiet seemed to descend from the range, sniffing at the air and deciding that no other demons attempted to creep closer and catch him unawares. Tannen relaxed, settling onto his forked tail as he began feasting on the slug-oth's meat. The food burned Tannen's tongue and throat, made him feel like he was swallowing solidified acid. He needed the nourishment. His self-imposed starvation had lasted days. It worked, though. The first nip of flesh in Tannen's mouth as the fight began had driven him into a frenzy, a bloodlust that urged him to kill with a deadly, unmatched skill. It wasn't just the need to eat which charged Tannen to hunt. He enjoyed the challenge. Today's slug-oth had been the meanest, nastiest, largest he'd encountered. Now it lay defeated, ruined, as did all demons when Tannen settled on them as his latest prey. Tannen watched the black moon rise in the purple skies above, feeling equally proud and invincible. There's always another demon, Tannen thought. A bigger one. If only there were more of a test. Something like me. Tannen had searched, but as far as he knew, he was the only demon of his kind. A warrior, like no other. Demon kind seemed sparse of late, as if hiding in low places, or their race was simply disappearing. The thought troubled Tannen. Demons dying out in large numbers meant less chance to eat, a limited opportunity to battle. Growling to himself with displeasure at his lack of worthy foes, Tannen watched the usual green mist that hung around the plains seep back into place around him, covering the pile of bones that had been his prey. Their brawl dispersed the fog for a time. A tight, bulging sensation began to pull at his skin, a sensitivity that came with his injury regeneration, like invisible hands stitching at him. Extending his forked tongue, he licked at his previously ruined eyeball, finding the socket empty no longer. A black orb forming there once more. Idly, Tannen wondered at his intelligence, the skills he commanded. It seemed unfair. He, a perfect creature, destined to hunt and kill demons unworthy of his attention. It had been this way for 500 years, and Tannen had begun to accept he was without equal, a thought that left him curiously empty. His stomach growing full as the Sluggoth meat neared its end, Tannen began to plan his next conquest.
Perhaps the wait for my equal is the true test,
he told himself,
and my patience shall reward me.
Standing on his powerful clawed hind legs, Tannen decided to head south. The air smelled fouler that way. He wouldn't require sustenance for a number of days, which would allow him to scout the area for the mightiest demon he could find. Then Tannen would study its ways and discover its strengths and weaknesses.
Although,
he thought,
the less of the latter the better.
Tannen despised efficiency of any kind, especially ones that made his victory more assured. Grabbing the last jagged piece of Sluggoth flesh with his tail and throwing it up into the air, Tannen caught it between his fangs, swallowing it whole. Dropping down to all fours, he vaulted away at a startling pace. Tannen could cover 10 miles in as many minutes at full strength. He decided to push himself, to see just how extreme his limits were. A noise, unlike anything Tannen heard before, brought him to a full stop. A light sound. The only other thing he could liken it to is when the wind would blow through stalagmites in the frozen wastelands of the north. This chime echoed all around him, its presence fading into whisper, before silence fell once more. Tannen crouched, making himself as small as possible, readying for an attack. Pointed ears pricked. He sniffed the air for predators. Unless his senses failed him, Tannen believed himself the only entity on the plains for miles in every direction. Relaxing his muscles slightly and standing on his hind legs, bringing himself to his full height, Tannen slowly turned around in a tiny circle, trusting his replenished eyes to serve him, when his ears and nose would not. The plains were empty, his senses in full agreement. Suddenly, the noise sounded again, louder this time, accompanied by a blinding flash of white light that chased the murk and shadows away. Tannen attempted to shield his vision, but his arms wouldn't follow his command. Baring his fangs, he strained to lift his limb again but failed. A thick growl escaped his maw as he pushed his legs forward to no avail. He was paralyzed, still standing upright but unable to move, blinded by the light. A curious sensation worked its way up from the pit of Tannen's stomach, journeying through his muscled chest, before catching slightly in his throat. Entering his brain, it triggered a feeling that he hadn't felt in over 200 years. Fear. Tannen had been defeated. He was a fighter, and had overturned any odds against him before. But against this new foe, this light with its gentle resonance, he held no answer. Tannen felt sure he would die without the chance to defend himself, to unleash his fury and attack without mercy. His death would be that of a craven.
No,
Tannen's rage-filled voice boomed in his mind.
I refuse. I will meet my foe without fear. Look it in the eye when it slays me. A warrior's death.
Tannen tensed, attempting to make his back as straight as possible. Even that didn't work. Still, it had been over a minute since the light seized Tannen, and no blow had yet been dealt. His vision began to adjust to the glare which had invaded the gloom. Tannen could see it extended into the purple skies above his head, a narrow column that seemed wide enough just to encompass him. Following the source to his clawed three-toed feet, Tannen discovered he stood on a circle. Peculiar markings covered it, one that seemed to glow even brighter than the beams surrounding him, pulsing in time with the sound which had not gone away as it did before.
"We've got something!"
A cry in a strange voice thundered from above. Tannen had on rare occasion come across other demons that spoke as he, guttural, rasping, as if you could hear the impending violence on their tongues. This clear, crisp sound was completely alien to him.
"It's strong!"
Another voice said, the tone a little deeper than the last, though Tannen could hear the worry lacing the words.
"Much more forceful than anything we've ensnared before."
A pause.
"I think you should let this one go, Master Garrett." "Nonsense!"
The one named Garrett snapped. Tannen could almost taste the anger and frustration in this one's voice. Another of the demon's skills. Emotions were tangible to him. Tannen could hear them, feel them, taste them. He coveted the fear which spilled from his prey the most. It drove him on, strengthened his resolve like nothing else.
"It will serve our purposes better than we could have wished for. If this demon is as mighty as you say, shall bring me great fortune and respect. Bring it through, Eleman." "As you wish, Master,"
Eleman replied heavily. The noise that had halted Tannen sounded again, deafening, as if resounding from inside his skull, plunging him into darkness, where his senses fled entirely. Part 3. The Slave.
"Ugly bastard, isn't it?"
Tannen's 4 eyes blinked open one by one. Damage from the blazing light lingered still, rendering him blind for the moment. Disoriented, Tannen's first instinct when in danger, lowering himself onto all fours in a coiled crouch, proved impossible. The foe who had captured Tannen held him tight still.
"4 eyes!"
The higher-pitched voice continued, his excitement hitting Tannen in waves.
"Black as midnight. Look at that tail. And the claws. My word, Eleman. I've hit the mother lode here. God's rot if I haven't. What height would you say it is?" 7.5 foot, at least,"
Eleman replied, slowly, a slither of fear oozing from his direction. Tannen sniffed at it, a balm for his own panic.
"I'd estimate an arm span of around 9. Additionally, I'm fairly sure it is a he, Master Garrett, and that he can understand you." "Nonsense,"
Garrett replied, waving his hand in a superior manner.
The other one is perceptive.
Tannen thought, his lack of orientation fading. 2 creatures he'd never come across before faced him. Small of muscle and pale of flesh, they stood a good head, neck, and shoulders shorter than the demon. Fine hair, one dark and the other light, covered their heads. It fell to their mid-back and sprouted from above their 2 eyes, one set with brown coloring and the other blue. Curiously, the fuzz surrounded their mouths too.
Hideous creatures,
Tannen thought.
Their bodies weak. These cannot be the ones who captured me.
His 4 eyeballs darted around the environment, searching for his captor. Accustomed to the light now, Tannen could see his location clearly in almost all directions at once. The place was made of stone, like those of the mountains he was familiar with, but these a yellowish cast, and they covered the entire floor and blocked his view of the sky above. Strange apparatus filled the area, brittle-looking things with 4 legs surrounded by a larger object made of the same material. Scraps of waste lay upon it. Curious markings, like the ones he saw in the pulsating circle, were etched upon them. There was one familiar thing he came across. A fire blazed behind the two creatures, contained in a nook cut into the stone.
"Look, Master,"
the light-haired one said, pointing at Tannen's face.
"How he surveys the room. He knows fire at least, or fears it. As all demons we bring here do,"
said the darker-colored creature.
"Elamon, you're a fine apprentice, but at times I despair. You know their kind cannot speak beyond grunts, and even that's rare enough. They're little more than beasts used for sport and the gaining of wealth."
Tannen listened to the pair. He understood their speech, but some words held no meaning. But the demon's quick mind had already begun associating the language with the objects they discussed. Like he did when facing any prey, Tannen observed for his foe's strengths and weaknesses.
"Whatever you say, Master,"
Elamon muttered, the taste of frustrated and resentful emotions swirling into Tannen's airways.
"But this is unlike any demon I've ever seen. Fine, have it your way,"
Garrett snapped, Tannen savoring the pride emanating from the creature.
"A new lesson in will. I want you to keep the flows around the demon strong, but isolate and remove the ones around its cranium from the jaw to the top of its skull. You can do this, yes?"
Elamon didn't reply, instead narrowing his eyes and staring at Tannen. The demon felt something then, a quickening of intention flowing from his captor. As Elamon's focus sharpened, Tannen felt a sliding in his brain, as if a barrier had been removed, opening an area in his mind that had previously been closed off.
"Too clumsy!"
Garrett cried, slapping Elamon across the face with the back of its hand.
"Like this!"
The pressure of Garrett's will felt like being crushed below a rock slide. Tannen tried to focus his own mind to push the pressure away. But before he could fumble for the focus required, the weight lifted.
"Speak if you can, demon,"
Garrett sneered, lip curling at Elamon, who lay at his feet.
"What manner of creature are you?"
Tannen said, working his jaw, speaking slowly in order to make his words clear and understood. Elamon scrambled backwards towards the fire. Garrett took a step forward, a renewed focus on the demon. Unafraid due to the confidence he stored in whatever means Tannen had been secured with would hold.
"This will,"
the demon thought.
"It's not like a normal drive to succeed. It is more."
"My, you are intelligent, aren't you?"
Garrett whispered, coming within touching distance of Tannen, peering up into his eyes.
"What are we? Humans, males like you. If what my apprentice says is correct, then why doubt him now? I brought you to this place. You are mine. Do you understand?"
"I am no one's but my own,"
Tannen replied, still unable to move a muscle except his jaw.
"How are you doing this to me?"
Elamon had climbed to his feet, holding his face with a resentful glare aimed at his master's back. The taste of the hatred delighted Tannen.
"The simple folk call it magic,"
Garrett replied.
"and I suppose it is. Some of us are able to exert our will on reality better than others. I wish to bring a demon from your world to mine, so I willed it to be. You are to stay there, unmoving, until I will it different. Those with talent can be taught, though some are faster learners than others,"
he said, glancing at Alaman, who now stood a respectful distance from the bound demon.
"Tell me, what is that?"
Garrett asked, pointing towards the flames.
"Fire,"
Tannen answered, prepared to humor the master, as he learned much from the human in the process. Physically, Garrett would be no match for him.
"This will is a different matter,"
he thought,
Mine has always been stronger than any other. I wonder.
Good,
Garrett replied.
excellent. Do you fear it?
No,
Why not? Many do, and not only beasts.
it does not harm me.
Tannen answered plaintively.
My hide feels its warmth, but it leaves no burns as it does with others.
What of these scars, then?
Garrett asked, pointing at the marks on Tannen's torso left from the battle with the Sluggoth.
How did you acquire these?
Acidic blood caused them.
Tannen replied.
They are of no consequence. The healing shall be complete soon.
What do you mean? Elliman cut in. The fear that had oozed from him had grown thicker, to the level where Tannen was perplexed that Garrett couldn't taste it too.
My wounds repair. It has always been so.
Master, a word, please!
Elliman said quickly, striding away from the fire. Garrett sighed dramatically before following.
We must send this one back.
Elamon whispered, unaware of Tannen's superior hearing. It was as if the two humans spoke into the demon's ears.
Don't be a fool.
Garrett replied angrily.
A demon with this one's skills? Its intelligence? I shall be undefeated. Nothing could match me in the arena.
Master, Elamon said, hesitating.
The prophecy.
And their folly shall they cause their return. A warrior, like no other. Combined our doom they will speak. Will shall falter against them. Those who walk to part, together once more, seizing dominion upon our minds and upon our souls.
Yes, I'm aware of it, Elliman.
Garrett smirked, waving a hand dismissively.
The ravings of a lunatic. But look, has my will faltered against this demon? And the words speak of two. It is but one.
Garrett returned to Tannen, pausing at the long waist-high object that rang the length of the room. Taking a small object in his hand, he lifted it to his lips and swallowed. Whatever it was, it left a dark stain on the human's flat teeth.
Demon?
Garrett asked, speaking loudly enough so his companion could hear.
Are there more like you?
No,
Tannen replied, seeing no reason to lie.
I am alone, and I have not returned. Wherever this place is, I have never seen it before.
Ah, you could hear our whispers.
Garrett replied, looking back at Elamon.
See? It is the only one of its kind. You need not worry. Yes, master,
Elamon replied sullenly, doubt now mixing with the fear exuding from his body. Garrett took a step backwards and appraised Tannen once more, a finger tapping against his mouth as he thought. He glanced at Elamon, then raised the object to his lips again. The probing weight that Tannen had felt when Garrett exerted his will echoed in the demon's mind again. It almost felt like something inside him wanted to respond in kind. An urge to not only meet the foreign presence, but to beat it away, to dominate it.
I believe it's time to find out what you're capable of.
Garrett said, nodding to himself.
Why am I here?
Tannen asked, knowing the human to be so arrogant, it enjoyed being asked simple questions to answer. Not heeding the information he granted Tannen.
To fight, so you can make me rich, powerful.
Garrett replied, giving the demon a calculating stare.
There is an arena where your kind fight to the death. The winner's owner takes the spoils. There are vast amounts of money to be made, and the respect and influence that comes with it counts for more.
Humans have been taking demons.
Tannen stated, the reason his world had seemed so empty of late becoming clear.
The same way you ensnared me.
Yes,
Garrett replied.
but with you, I feel I won't have need to hunt anymore. You shall be invincible.
As he spoke, the weight of Garrett's will pressed against Tannen. His own attempted to answer, but was brushed nonchalantly aside. The sound which he heard back on the plains rang again, and the room seemed to fold in on itself before a light blinded Tannen once more. Part 4. The Hunt. Tannen could move again. He found himself alone in pitch darkness, stone beneath his feet. The air smelled dead, with hardly any of it circling around him. Crouching down as small as he could, Tannen kept his 4 eyes open to acclimatize them to the prevailing gloom, while reaching his arms out as wide as he could. At around elbows width apart, Tannen felt smooth rock on either side. He slowly raised himself to his full height, his pointed ears brushing against the same substance above him. He allowed the claws in his hands to lengthen and tapped once against the surface to his sides. The sound echoed ahead and behind him. In response, he heard a faint whimper, distant but unmistakably human. Tannen scratched at the stone, drawing the noise out, making it a little louder. A remote cry, followed by far-off footsteps, responded.
They send me something to hunt.
Tannen thought.
A performance.
Garrett and Elliman were the first humans the demons had encountered. The prospect of killing one excited him. He would prefer his prey to be the master who captured him, but this one would do for now. Tannen smelled the air again, carefully testing the scent ahead and behind him. The demon had hunted in caves before, of which this current location was not too dissimilar. And new echoes could disorientate. The trace aroma left by a quarry could be used with more accuracy and emotion.
There it is.
Tannen thought.
Coming from behind. I taste fear.
Retracting the claws on his hands and feet, the demon began to move silently towards his prey, arms outstretched to test for any openings. He came across some, and, as he did, Tannen paused and stretched out with his senses, the trail of the human becoming stronger, telling him in which direction he needed to move. Once in a while, he'd extract a claw and tap, tap, tapped. The prey knew he was not alone in this place. Its movement grew louder and more frenzied, as did its fear.
It is only a matter of time before I find you, little human.
Tannen thought, moving forwards with silent purpose. Tannen came to a section where the opening stretched out ahead of him, and to the left and right. He crouched low and inhaled. The human stench came from ahead. He could hear its blind, hectic footsteps staggering towards him. Tannen took a step backwards, slowly extended his claws. Carefully, he turned to the stone on his left and dug his talons into it, climbing out of the human's way, hanging upside down. Tannen waited, his prey growing ever closer, waves of fear cascading from it, feeding Tannen's bloodlust. The demon's eyes had grown accustomed to the gloom, and he could see several feet ahead of him. And there it was, spinning and gibbering to itself. A naked human male stumbled and tripped unwittingly towards Tannen's trap. As it passed beneath the demon, Tannen dropped, flowing into deadly action. Talons extended. Tannen aimed the first strike across the human's eyes, blinding it as orbs were ripped out of its sockets. The man's cries were short-lived, a second slice arriving moments after, tearing across the human's soft neck, ripping it apart, blood gushing down its torso. Landing on his feet, Tannen plunged his hands into the human's chest as far as his claws could reach. He felt them push through to the other side. He wrenched them sideways, opening the midriff, before widening his jaw as far as possible and biting down on the human's head, severing it from its neck. The onslaught lasted 5 seconds, Mere moments to turn the human into a ferocious ruin of limbs and organs discarded on the floor. Tannen spat the head out, releasing a guttural roar of rage, defiance, and bloodlust that echoed around him. Then the now familiar sound rang, followed by the flash of light. Tannen's vision folded on itself once more. Part 5. The Bargain. Tannen had been bound with will and left in a tight, darkened room for days. He wasn't sure how many, but his hunger began to turn ravenous. Human blood lingered in his mind. The taste of it, mixed with the exquisite fear he'd sampled, made him long for more. The ease of the kill left him disappointed, but the thrill of his first human conquest made the hunt memorable. Tannen knew Garrett's plan for him. To battle in this arena would give him the chance to triumph, but Tannen would look for any misstep that he could capitalize on. Tannen had begun flexing his will carefully after his encounter with the humans, certain he had this gift Garrett spoke of. Gently, the demon probed the bounds left upon him, searching for a flaw. He'd found it. At certain points, the restraints relaxed slightly, as if Garrett exerted his will elsewhere, or simply became distracted or slept. Tannen realized a part of his mind must always be concerned with any feats of will used, and that was best achieved with a clear focus. Garrett had never leaked fear or doubt during their conversation, and Tannen felt sure that if he had, the human's will would not have been so effective.
Demon!
So consumed with his thoughts, Tannen hadn't realized another presence drew near. It was the human, Elamon, his voice coming from beyond one of the stone barriers.
I hear you, human,
Tannen replied, curious as to why his visitor came alone.
You are to fight today,
Elamon said, a mix of emotion drifting from him. Fear, doubt, hate, pity.
Do not feel sorry for me,
Tannen spat out, disgusted.
A creature such as you cannot show disrespect to one like me.
Why?
The human stuttered.
How do you know I feel these things?
I can sense your pity.
The demon answered.
Taste your fear. The hatred you harbor for your master is delicious.
He is a fool,
Elamon said quickly,
and underestimates you, but I can feel it. You have the will.
I know.
I can teach you.
The human continued to speak in a hurry.
You can destroy Garrett with it. Be free.
Why offer me this?
Tannen asked.
Because I believe in the prophecy, even if Garrett doesn't.
Elamon replied bitterly.
You will be our undoing. I only ask for you to spare me. I do not wish to die. I saw what you did to the slave.
Slave?
Like you, the man in the labyrinth you slaughtered, property of Garrett's. I must go, but think on my words. Your will is powerful, but needs to be honed. I would wish you luck in the arena, but what's the point? I know you'll be victorious.
Part 6. The Arena. Tannen stood, blinded, not by the light. He heard the familiar sound and knew the flash would follow, so he looked away and closed his eyes. This time it was the sky. After the room had folded in on itself, Tannen opened his eyes to be startled by the glow. The open air above him was brighter than anything he'd seen before. It slowly started to creak his eyes open, but the aurora burned. Then the cries and emotions of thousands cascading towards him left him overwhelmed. Humans in every direction roared. The feelings heightened with the prospect of impending violence.
This must be the arena,
Tannen snarled.
I will kill every single human in here. One day, if I get the chance.
The demon began to stretch to his full height, aware his protective crouch could appear to be a cower. Tannen thought back on Elamon's words earlier.
Your will is powerful.
And focused on it. He poured his strength into his resolve, blocking out the cries and emotions spilling around him, stilling the pumping of his twin hearts into a steady pulse. Tannen tested his vision again, dismissing the pain from the daylight and shielding his eyes, allowing them to grow accustomed to his surroundings. The breeze in the air had a familiar presence, one the demon couldn't place. Tannen could feel sand beneath his feet and a glaring warmth against his body. He kept his vision low and studied the ground. The demon stood in a wide, empty circle, the shale below white, but stained with crimson in places. He looked up a little further. Humans stood above on elevated stone that surrounded the circumference, a fusion of color and emotion. Raising his head, he studied the skies above, a clear blue. The moon in this place, a bright, angry, hot yellow that emanated heat. As far as he could tell, Tannen was alone.
Citizens!
Garrett's voice boomed above the din as he used his will to amplify his speech. Tannen looked up to see the humans standing in a section partitioned off from the rest of the crowd. Elamon and a select few others next to him.
Witness my champion! A warrior like no other!
He finished with a self-satisfied smirk. Outraged gasps echoed around the arena. Tannen reveled in the mixture of emotion rippling from the humans at the audacity of Garrett to invoke the words of the prophecy.
Who stands against its might?
Garrett continued, gesturing wide to the congregation. A different human close by Garrett stood, a fleshy creature with no hair on its head and face at all. Tannen watched as he felt the human's will flex and felt sure he could replicate it.
I would not be so sure of your victory.
The hairless one roared.
Behold, my advocate!
Tannen did not hear the familiar sound, guessing the chime must ring from inside and not out, but observed the column of golden light reaching from the sands to the blue skies above. Again, he felt the flex of will, his brain already working to fill in the gaps of how it could be achieved. The glow disappeared, and a hush descended on the arena. 50 feet away from Tannen stood his match, a demon similar to him in almost every way. Instead of gray skin mottled with orange, Tannen's twin was covered in patches of dark blue, its height slightly lesser. But the demon already seemed to cope with its new surroundings better than Tannen had. Its 4 eyes were purple instead of black, and on seeing the demon waiting across from it, retracted its claws. Tannen did the same and took a step forward, eyeing Garrett in the crowd.
It is what I've searched so long for.
Tannen thought.
Another like me. The prophecy.
The human stared at Elamon, mouth agape, color drained from his skin. The blonde-haired human whispered, pointed frantically at the demons paired on the sand. The atmosphere in the arena had become subdued. A bemused confusion became the overriding emotion. From some, abject fear spilled out. Many raced to leave the place.
People familiar with the prophecy, no doubt.
Tannen thought, watching the newcomer again. Others openly laughed at the reaction.
Non-believers.
The demon thought, resuming his walk towards his familiar. The other demon followed suit. They closed the gap quickly, standing before one another. Tannen inhaled loudly, sampling his opponents to be aroma. The demon held no fear. Curiosity mixed with confidence instead. It looked Tannen in the eyes without flinching, and he suddenly deciphered a difference in the scent.
You are female,
he whispered.
Yes,
She answered.
I am Talos.
She held her palms towards Tannen. He responded, placing his against hers.
I am Tannen.
He said.
Do I know you? I feel like I do.
Talos nodded.
We were created here, then banished. Now we have returned.
For Dominion.
Tannen replied.
For the kill,
Talos answered, emotions filled with eagerness pouring out of her. Tannen leaned forward with his forehead and rested against Talos. He could feel her emotions in his mind. Then her voice.
We will destroy them all,
she said.
Yes,
Tannen agreed.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Garrett's angry voice demanded.
Attack! Fight! I command it!
Tannen looked up at the human, fury in his eyes.
no!
The demon boomed, flexing his will and making his voice reverberate around the arena.
You defy me?
Garrett cried, the human's will hitting Tannen like an avalanche. The demon attempted to disobey the overwhelming instruction to attack Talos. He gripped her hands and squeezed, baring his teeth and growling in the back of his throat.
Fight him!
Talos' voice echoed in his mind.
His will is too strong.
Tannen replied, the claws in his hands and feet extending for the kill.
None are too powerful for us,
She replied.
Feel the fear in this place. Feed on it. Use it. Here, I can help you.
Tannen felt her mind push into his, and then extend outwards in a vast wave. A single word amplified. Through will.
Begone!
The direction to kill Talos disappeared instantly. Tannen looked quickly to where Garrett stood, to see the human reel backwards, blood leaking from his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Combined, the demons had overwhelmed Garrett's will. The human was broken, and the rest would follow.
Do you hunger, Talos?
Tannen asked in her mind.
For so much,
She answered, before turning and loping towards the crowd and leaping into it. Claws extended. The screams began, the fear palpable. Tannen smiled and followed her lead. The humans in the arena would just be the beginning. Part 7. Warriors like no other. Illiman, the only human left alive, cowered before the demons. Tannen watched Talos as she licked the ichor from her claws, content with her fill. He cast his eyes around the arena. The place was a ruin of giblets, crimson covering the sands and stone. The air stank of death. Tannen had been correct. Though many in the crowd were capable of using their will, the fear and confusion hadn't allowed them to focus. The slaughter had been rampant. The demons had reveled in it. At one point, Tannen came across Garrett, the human's body alive, but his mind destroyed. The demon had squeezed his eyeballs until the cranium had popped, then collapsed the rest between his fists, crushing his skull. The taste of the master's brain lingered on his tongue.
And now,
Tannen said,
there is one.
please.
Illiman begged, urine leaking to the sand beneath him.
Our bargain. I can teach you.
Just what would a traitor like you teach me?
Tannen asked. He flexed his will with a single word, before focusing it on Illiman. The human exploded from the inside out, a cloud of gore extending in all directions, covering Tannen in slime. The demon basked in it. There would be more to come. Talos came to stand beside Tannen, scanning the destruction in the arena.
What next?
She asked, though she already knew the answer. Tannen paused and reflected on the words of the prophecy.
And their folly, shall it cause their return? A warrior like no other they were. Combined our doom, they will speak. Will shall falter against them. Those who walked apart, together once more, seizing dominion upon our minds and upon our souls. We shall see what this world has to offer us, and if it does not give, we shall take.
The demons descended on the city beyond the arena, the cries and fear from the humans driving them on as they slaughtered all before them, until their domination was complete, and humankind was no more.